Influence isn't a trick. It's not a script. It's a mindset, a way of being that draws people in without force. True influence is invisible. It flows through confidence, character, and connection. If you have to shout to be heard, you've already lost. But if you speak with belief, listen with purpose, and act with integrity, people will follow you anywhere. In this video, I'll teach you how to build influence from the inside out. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind, and tell us, where are you watching from? I want you to understand something fundamental about influence, something that most people miss entirely as they chase techniques and tactics, desperately trying to increase their impact on others. The truth is simple, yet profound. Influence doesn't start with what you do. It starts with who you are. Think about the last time someone truly influenced you. Was it their words alone that moved you? Or was it something deeper, their presence, their authenticity, their unwavering belief in what they were saying? You see, we're all equipped with an extraordinary ability to detect authenticity. It's written into our DNA, this capacity to sense when someone is genuine and when they're simply performing. And this is where most people's attempts at influence fail before they even begin. They try to influence from the outside in. They memorize scripts, practice power poses, and attempt to manipulate through careful word choice. But authentic influence, the kind that moves mountains and changes lives, works from the inside out. Let me share something I've observed over decades of teaching people about human relations. The most influential people I've ever met aren't the ones with the most polished presentations or the cleverest phrases. They're the ones who've done the inner work. They've developed an unshakable sense of self. This inner foundation isn't built overnight. It's constructed slowly, deliberately, through daily choices and constant self-reflection. It's about asking yourself the hard questions. What do I truly believe? What are my non-negotiable values? What do I stand for when no one else is watching? When you build this foundation, something magical happens. Your words begin to carry weight, not because you've chosen them carefully, but because they're anchored in truth. Your presence becomes magnetic, not because you're trying to be charismatic, but because you're authentically aligned with your core beliefs. Think of it like this. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't lead others to places you haven't gone yourself. You can't inspire confidence if you're riddled with self-doubt. This is why the journey of influence must begin within. I've seen countless people try to skip this step. They want the shortcut, the quick fix, the 10 tips to be more influential. But here's what I know with absolute certainty. There are no shortcuts to authentic influence. The inner work must be done. Start by examining your relationship with yourself. How do you talk to yourself when you fail? How do you handle setbacks? Do you trust your own judgment? These aren't just philosophical questions. They're the building blocks of influential character. Remember, every external interaction is a reflection of your internal state. If you're constantly seeking approval, your attempts to influence will come across as needy. If you're insecure about your worth, your communication will be tinged with desperation. But when you're grounded in self-knowledge and self-acceptance, your very presence becomes a force of influence. This is why I always start here, with this fundamental truth. Influence begins within. Before you can master the art of moving others, you must first master yourself. Before you can inspire greatness in others, you must first cultivate it within. Take a moment right now to reflect. Are you trying to influence others from a place of inner certainty? Or are you simply mimicking what you think influence should look like? Are your words aligned with your deepest beliefs? Or are they empty echoes of what you think others want to hear? The path to perfect influence starts with this honest self-assessment. It starts with building that unshakable inner foundation. Because when you do this work, when you align your outer actions with your inner truth, influence becomes not something you do, but something you are. Let me tell you something that might surprise you. The most powerful force of influence isn't your vocabulary, your status, or even your expertise. It's your belief, your absolute unshakable conviction in what you're saying. I've spent my life studying human behavior, and I've witnessed this truth play out countless times. When someone speaks with genuine belief, something extraordinary happens. The room shifts, people lean in, hearts open, and it happens without a single technique or tactic being employed. You see, belief radiates. It emanates from you like heat from a fire. You can't fake it, you can't manufacture it, and you certainly can't hide its absence. This is why so many attempts at influence fall flat. They're missing this essential foundation. Think about the great leaders who have moved millions. Think about the teachers who changed your life. Think about the mentors who shaped your path. What did they all have in common? It wasn't perfection. It wasn't flawless delivery. It was unwavering belief in their message, their mission, their truth. Now, let me be clear about something. This isn't about blind confidence or baseless optimism. The kind of belief I'm talking about is earned. It's tested. It's forged in the crucible of experience and reflection. When you truly believe in something, when you've lived it, tested it, seen it work, that belief becomes a tangible force. People don't just hear your words. They feel your conviction. They don't just listen to your ideas. They experience your certainty. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think they need to be louder, more assertive, more forceful to convey their belief. Nothing could be further from the truth. Real belief doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It simply is. I remember working with a young executive years ago. She had all the right words, all the right techniques, but something was missing. Her team wasn't buying in. Do you know what the problem was? She didn't fully believe in what she was saying, and her team could sense it. We spent weeks working not on her presentation skills, but on her relationship with her own ideas. We dug deep into why she believed what she believed. We examined her experiences, her values, her true convictions. And when she finally spoke to her team again, something had changed. Her words hadn't changed much, but the force behind them, that silent force of belief, was undeniable. This is what I want you to understand. People don't follow perfection. They follow conviction. They don't need you to have all the answers. They need you to believe unshakably in the answers you do have. Think about it. When was the last time you were truly influenced by someone who seemed uncertain about their own message? When was the last time you were moved by someone who was just going through the motions? Your belief system is like a tuning fork. When it vibrates with certainty, it causes others to vibrate at the same frequency. This is why authentic influence can't be faked. The resonance of true belief is something people feel in their bones. So how do you develop this kind of belief? It starts with rigorous honesty. What do you know to be true? Not because someone told you, but because you've lived it. What principles have you tested in the laboratory of your own experience? What ideas light you up from the inside? These are your sources of authentic influence. These are the wellsprings from which genuine conviction flows. And when you speak from this place, when your words are backed by the full force of your lived truth, you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. Remember, the world is full of noise. Everyone is shouting to be heard. But true influence doesn't compete with this chaos. It cuts through it with the quiet power of genuine belief. When you speak with this kind of conviction, people don't just hear you, they feel you. And that's when real influence begins. In all my years of teaching the principles of influence and human relations, I've noticed something fascinating. Everyone wants to know how to speak more persuasively, but very few ask how to listen more effectively. Yet here's the truth that might surprise you. Your ability to listen is your greatest tool of influence. Let me paint you a picture of what typically happens in most conversations. While someone else is speaking, most people aren't really listening. They're just waiting for their turn to talk. They're mentally rehearsing their next point, planning their rebuttal, or thinking about something entirely unrelated. This isn't listening. It's merely taking turns making noise. But then there are those rare individuals who listen differently. When they listen with their entire being. Their eyes are focused. Their body is still. Their mind isn't wandering to their next meeting or their upcoming presentation. They're fully present, absorbing not just the words, but the meaning behind the words. These people, they're the ones who truly influence others. They're the ones who understand that influence isn't about dominating a conversation. It's about creating a connection. And the deepest connections are formed when someone feels truly heard. I want you to think about the last time someone really listened to you. Not just nodded along, not just waited for their turn to speak, but really listened. How did that make you feel? Important, valued, understood? That feeling, that profound sense of being heard, is one of the most powerful forces in human relations. You see, when you listen deeply to someone, you're doing something remarkable. You're giving them what most people desperately want but rarely receive, the experience of being truly understood. And when people feel understood, they become more open to your influence naturally, without any persuasion techniques needed. But here's what most people don't realize about effective listening. It's not a passive activity. It's not about simply staying quiet while the other person talks. Real listening is active. It's engaged. It's a form of leadership. When you listen actively, you're doing several things simultaneously. You're picking up on tone of voice. You're noticing body language. You're hearing not just the words being said, but the emotions behind them. You're catching the subtle hints, the unspoken concerns, the hidden hopes. This kind of listening gives you intelligence that no amount of talking ever could. It reveals people's true motivations, their deep-seated fears, their authentic aspirations. And when you have this information, your ability to influence increases exponentially. Let me share a technique I've taught to thousands of people over the years. The next time you're in a conversation, try this. Focus entirely on understanding the other person's perspective. Don't think about what you're going to say next. Don't judge whether they're right or wrong. Just try to see the world through their eyes. Ask questions that deepen your understanding. What led you to that conclusion? How did that experience affect you? What matters most to you about this? These questions show that you're not just hearing words, you're seeking to understand. And here's something crucial. When someone is speaking, give them your complete attention. Put away your phone. Close your laptop. Turn your body toward them. Make eye contact. These physical signals of attention are powerful. They say, "Whata?" You're saying matters to me. Remember, influence isn't about pushing your ideas onto others. It's about creating an environment where people feel safe sharing their thoughts, where they feel valued enough to be vulnerable, where they feel understood enough to be open to new perspectives. The most influential people I've ever known weren't the ones who spoke the most eloquently. They were the ones who listened the most intently. They were the ones who made others feel heard, understood, and valued. In a world where everyone is fighting to be heard, the simple act of genuine listening becomes a superpower. It sets you apart. It makes you memorable. It creates trust. And trust, my friends, is the foundation of all influence. So if you want to master the art of influence, start by mastering the art of listening. Make it your mission to understand before being understood. Because when people feel truly heard, they become naturally more open to hearing you. This is the paradox of influence. The less you try to impose your views, and the more you seek to understand others, the more influential you become. Your ability to listen, truly, deeply, actively listen, is your greatest weapon in the art of influence. There's a fundamental truth about human nature that, once understood, will transform your ability to influence others. Every person you meet has a deep, unmet hunger to feel important. This isn't vanity. It's a basic human need as essential as food or water. I've spent decades teaching this principle, and I can tell you without hesitation, the ability to make others feel genuinely important is the master key to influence. Not false flattery, not manipulation, but genuine appreciation for the value in others. Think about it. When was the last time someone made you feel truly important? Not just complimented you, but really made you feel valued for who you are. Notice how that memory stands out. Notice how you naturally warm to that person. That's not coincidence. That's human nature at work. You see, most people go through life feeling undervalued and unappreciated. They do good work that goes unnoticed. They have ideas that go unheard. They make contributions that go unacknowledged. And in this environment, someone who can make others feel genuinely important becomes incredibly influential. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think making others feel important means constant praise or obvious flattery. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, insincere praise is worse than no praise at all. People can detect insincerity from a mile away, and it destroys trust instantly. The art of making others feel important starts with something much more fundamental: genuine interest. You must develop a real curiosity about others. What makes them unique? What are they proud of? What challenges have they overcome? What dreams do they harbor? Let me share a story that illustrates this principle. Years ago, I was teaching a class on human relations, and one of my students was struggling to influence his team at work. He was competent, knowledgeable, and hard-working, but something was missing. When we analyzed his approach, we discovered the problem. He was so focused on proving his own importance that he was making everyone else feel unimportant. Every conversation was an opportunity for him to showcase his expertise, correct others' mistakes, or push his own agenda. We worked on shifting his focus. Instead of trying to be the most important person in the room, he started looking for importance in others. He began asking about their experiences. He acknowledged their contributions. He showed genuine interest in their perspectives. The transformation was remarkable. Within weeks, his influence had increased dramatically. People who had once resisted his ideas were now seeking his opinion. Team members who had been distant were now engaged and supportive. What had changed? Not his knowledge, not his expertise, not his position, only his ability to make others feel important. Here's how you can develop this crucial skill. First, start seeing the importance in others. Everyone you meet knows something you don't. Everyone has overcome challenges you haven't faced. Everyone has qualities worthy of admiration. Train yourself to look for these things. Second, acknowledge contributions specifically. Don't just say, "Good job." Explain exactly what was good about it. The way you handled that customer complaint showed real empathy and problem-solving skills. Specific appreciation is far more powerful than general praise. Third, remember and reference what matters to others. When someone shares something important to them, whether it's a personal goal, a family situation, or a professional challenge, make a mental note. Following up on these things later shows that you value them enough to remember. Fourth, give others the spotlight. When success occurs, look for ways to highlight others' contributions. Share credit generously. Let others tell their stories. Your influence grows when you help others shine. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, be genuine. Don't do these things as techniques or tactics. Do them because you truly understand that every person has value, every person has importance, every person deserves recognition. Remember, true influence isn't about making yourself appear important. It's about making others feel important. When you master this principle, doors open that were once locked. Relationships deepen that were once shallow. Influence flows naturally where it once had to be forced. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it creates a virtuous cycle. When you make others feel important, they naturally want to make you feel important in return. When you value others, they naturally come to value you. When you elevate others, you end up elevating yourself. But here's the key: you can't fake this. You can't approach it as a technique or a strategy. You must develop a genuine appreciation for the importance of others. You must truly believe that every person you meet has value, has wisdom, has something worthy of recognition. When you develop this mindset, when making others feel important becomes not something you do, but something you are, your influence will grow beyond anything you thought possible. Because in the end, people may forget what you said, they may forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Let me share with you one of the most powerful secrets of influence I've discovered in my years of working with people. True influence doesn't flow from intellectual superiority. It flows from emotional understanding. In other words, empathy isn't just a soft skill, it's emotional leadership. You see, most people think influence is about being the smartest person in the room, having the best argument, or knowing the most facts. But I've watched countless brilliant people fail to influence others simply because they couldn't connect emotionally. And I've seen people with average intelligence move mountains because they understood one simple truth. People are moved by emotions first, logic second. Think about this for a moment. When was the last time you changed your mind about something important because someone presented you with cold, hard facts? Now, when was the last time you changed your mind because someone truly understood how you felt, acknowledged your perspective, and made you feel safe enough to consider a new viewpoint? This is the power of empathy in action. It's not about agreeing with everyone. It's about understanding them at a deeper level. It's about developing what I call emotional intelligence in leadership. Let me tell you about a CEO I worked with years ago. He was brilliant, strategic, and had all the right answers. But his team was disengaged, resistant to change, and productivity was falling. When we analyzed the situation, the problem became clear. He was leading from the head, not the heart. He could explain the what and the how of every initiative perfectly, but he never stopped to understand the emotional impact of these changes on his people. He never considered their fears, their hopes, their personal investments in the old way of doing things. We worked on developing his empathy, not as a technique, but as a fundamental way of leading. He started spending time understanding the emotional landscape of his organization. He began asking questions like, how does this change feel to you? What concerns keep you up at night? What would make you feel more confident about this direction? The transformation was remarkable. Within months, the same initiatives that had met resistance were now being embraced. The same team that had been disengaged was now energized and committed. What changed? Not the facts, not the logic, not the business case, only the leader's ability to connect emotionally with his people. This is what I mean by emotional leadership, when you can truly feel what others feel, their fears, their aspirations, their uncertainties. You gain the ability to influence at a deeper level. People follow those who understand them, not just those who direct them. But here's what most people get wrong about empathy. They think it means always agreeing, always being nice, always putting others' feelings first. That's not empathy. That's pandering. True empathy is about understanding emotions, not being controlled by them. Sometimes the most empathetic thing you can do is challenge someone's perspective. But, and this is crucial, you can only do this effectively after you've demonstrated genuine understanding of their emotional reality. Let me give you a practical approach to developing this kind of emotional leadership. First, learn to read emotional cues. Pay attention to tone of voice, facial expressions, body language. These often tell you more than words ever could. When someone says, "I'm fine," but their body is tense and their voice is tight, believe the nonverbal signals. Second, practice emotional validation. Before you try to influence or persuade, acknowledge the legitimacy of others' feelings. "I can understand why you'd feel that way" is a powerful phrase when it's sincere. Third, share your own emotional experiences judiciously. Vulnerability, when appropriate, creates connection. But it must be authentic and relevant, not just emotional sharing for its own sake. Fourth, develop your emotional vocabulary. The better you can name and describe emotions, the better you can understand and connect with others' emotional experiences. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, maintain your emotional center. Empathy doesn't mean becoming an emotional sponge. It means understanding others' emotions while staying grounded in your own emotional stability. Remember this: in any situation where you're trying to influence others, there are always two conversations happening. There's the surface conversation about facts, figures, and logical arguments, and there's the deeper conversation about feelings, fears, and aspirations. Most people focus entirely on the surface conversation and wonder why they can't influence effectively. But true influence happens when you can engage in both conversations simultaneously, when you can address both the logical and emotional dimensions of any situation. This is why empathy is such a powerful force for influence. When people feel emotionally understood, they become more open to new ideas. When they feel emotionally safe, they become more willing to change. When they feel emotionally connected, they become more likely to follow your lead. In the end, emotional leadership through empathy isn't just about making people feel good, it's about creating the emotional conditions that make influence possible. Because when you can truly understand and connect with others' emotional realities, you don't have to push for influence, it flows naturally. There's a fundamental truth about human nature that I've observed over and over again in my years of teaching. Facts may convince, but emotions compel. If you want to master the art of influence, you must learn to speak not just to the mind, but to the heart. Think about the last time you were truly moved to action. Was it because of a spreadsheet, a logical argument, a list of bullet points? Or was it because something touched you at an emotional level, a story, an image, a personal connection that reached past your rational mind and grabbed your heart? You see, we humans like to think of ourselves as rational beings. We pride ourselves on our logic, our ability to analyze and make reasoned decisions. But the truth is, even our most logical decisions are deeply influenced by our emotions. This isn't a weakness. It's how we're wired. Our emotional brain processes information far faster than our rational brain. It's what helped our ancestors survive, and it's what drives most of our decisions today, whether we realize it or not. Let me share a story that illustrates this principle. Years ago, I was working with a brilliant engineer who was frustrated because his team wasn't adopting his clearly superior technical solution. His presentations were perfect, detailed specifications, comprehensive data, irrefutable logic, but nothing changed. Then one day, instead of presenting more data, he shared a story. He talked about his grandfather, a craftsman who taught him that the right tool could make any job not just easier, but joyful. He described how his solution would give his team back hours of their lives, hours they could spend with family, pursuing passions, or simply resting. The same team that had resisted his logical arguments for months was suddenly engaged, asking questions, eager to try his solution. What changed? Not the facts, they were the same. What changed was how he presented them. He stopped trying to win the argument and started trying to win hearts. This is what I mean by speaking to the heart. It's about understanding that influence isn't just about transferring information, it's about creating connection, inspiration, and meaning. But here's where many people get it wrong. They think speaking to the heart means being overly emotional or manipulative. Nothing could be further from the truth. Speaking to the heart means connecting your message to what people deeply care about. Every person you're trying to influence has hopes, fears, dreams, and values. When your message connects with these emotional anchors, it becomes more than information, it becomes meaningful. Let me give you some practical ways to speak to the heart. First, use stories. Our brains are wired for narrative. We remember stories far better than facts, and we connect with them more deeply. But not just any stories, stories that illustrate truth, that carry meaning, that show rather than tell. Second, paint pictures with your words. Don't just say, "This will improve efficiency." Help people see what that means. Imagine leaving work every day, knowing you've accomplished more, feeling less stressed, having more energy for the things that matter most to you. Third, connect to values. Every group, every organization, every person has core values. When your message aligns with these values, it resonates at a deeper level. Show how your idea supports what people already believe is important. Fourth, acknowledge emotions honestly. If people are afraid of change, don't dismiss their fears. Address them. If they're excited about possibilities, share their enthusiasm. Emotional honesty creates emotional connection. Fifth, use metaphors and analogies. These powerful tools help people relate new ideas to familiar experiences. They create emotional bridges between what is known and what is possible. But remember this crucial point: speaking to the heart must be authentic. People can sense when you're trying to manipulate their emotions, and it destroys trust instantly. Your goal isn't to exploit emotions, but to connect with them genuinely. Think of it this way: logic builds cases, but emotion moves people to action. Facts inform, but feelings inspire. Data points convince, but stories transform. This doesn't mean you should abandon logic or ignore facts. Rather, you should present your logical arguments within an emotional framework that gives them meaning and relevance. When you're trying to influence others, ask yourself, what does this mean to them emotionally? How does this connect to what they care about? What stories can I tell that will make this real and relevant? Remember, the heart has reasons that reason knows nothing of. If you want to influence deeply and lastingly, you must speak to both. Because when head and heart align, influence becomes not just possible, but inevitable. The most powerful communicators in history understood this. They didn't just present facts, they painted pictures of possibility. They didn't just make arguments, they told stories that touched hearts. They didn't just inform, they inspired. This is your challenge as an influencer, to master the art of speaking to the heart while never neglecting the mind. When you can do this, when you can connect with both the emotional and rational dimensions of human nature, your influence will multiply exponentially. There's a special kind of influence that doesn't announce itself with words. It's the quiet power of emotional self-control, the ability to maintain your composure when others are losing theirs. I call this controlling the temperature of the room, and it's one of the most powerful forms of influence you can master. Think about someone you know who stays calm in crisis, someone who maintains their center when everyone else is spinning out of control. Notice how others naturally look to this person for leadership, even if they don't hold an official position of authority. This is no accident. It's the magnetic pull of emotional stability. You see, in any group, the person with the most emotional self-control tends to become the de facto leader. Why? Because human beings naturally seek stability in chaos. We're drawn to those who can maintain their composure when we've lost ours. Let me share a principle I've taught to thousands of leaders. The person with the most emotional stability in any situation is the person with the most influence. Not the loudest voice, not the highest title, not the most expertise, the most emotional stability. I remember working with a senior executive who was frustrated because her team meetings often devolved into heated arguments and emotional outbursts. She tried speaking louder, being more assertive, imposing stricter rules, but nothing worked. Then we worked on a different approach. Instead of trying to control the room through force, she learned to control it through calm. When voices raised, she lowered hers. When emotions flared, she became more measured. When others rushed to speak, she deliberately slowed down. The transformation was remarkable. Within weeks, the entire dynamic of her meetings had changed. The team naturally began to mirror her composure. Discussions became more productive. Decisions became more rational. Influence flowed naturally from her emotional stability. This is what I mean by controlling the temperature of the room. It's about understanding that emotions are contagious, and the most controlled emotion tends to spread and dominate. But here's what most people get wrong about emotional control. They think it means suppressing emotions or being cold and detached. Nothing could be further from the truth. Real emotional control isn't about not feeling, it's about not being controlled by what you feel. Let me give you practical strategies for developing this kind of emotional leadership. First, develop your emotional awareness. Notice when your emotions start to rise. Pay attention to physical cues, increased heart rate, tension in your shoulders, changes in your breathing. The sooner you can detect emotional escalation, the better you can manage it. Second, master the pause. When emotions run high, most people feel compelled to respond immediately. But influence belongs to those who can pause, breathe, and respond rather than react. Make the pause your power move. Third, learn to modulate your voice. When others get louder, speak more softly. When others speed up, slow down. When others become intense, become measured. Your voice is a powerful tool for setting emotional tone. Fourth, maintain open body language. When tensions rise, most people close off physically, crossed arms, rigid posture, avoided eye contact. By consciously keeping your body language open and relaxed, you send powerful signals of emotional stability. Fifth, use calm as your superpower. When everyone expects you to match their emotional intensity, surprise them with composure. There's nothing more influential than being the one person who stays steady when everyone else is shaken. Remember this: in any heated situation, someone is going to set the emotional temperature of the room. Someone's level of emotional control will become the standard that others unconsciously mirror. Why shouldn't that someone be you? This doesn't mean you never show emotion. It doesn't mean you're always serene and unaffected. It means you choose when and how to express emotion rather than being controlled by it. Think of yourself as the emotional thermostat in any room you enter. Just as a thermostat doesn't eliminate temperature, it regulates it. Your role isn't to eliminate emotion, but to help regulate it. To bring heat when it's needed, cool when it's appropriate, always. Working toward the optimal temperature for productive interaction. This kind of emotional leadership creates what I call a calm field around you. People learn that in your presence, emotions don't have to run wild. Problems can be discussed without drama. Conflicts can be resolved without crisis. And here's the beautiful thing about this approach: it builds trust over time. People come to rely on your stability. They seek out your presence when things get tough. They value your influence, not because you demand it, but because you demonstrate it through your consistent emotional leadership. But remember, this isn't about being artificially calm or suppressing natural reactions. It's about developing real emotional mastery, the kind that comes from understanding that your greatest influence often lies not in what you do, but in what you choose not to do. In a world that's increasingly emotional, increasingly reactive, increasingly volatile, the ability to maintain your center becomes increasingly valuable. When you can stay calm while others are losing their composure, you become a natural center of influence, a fixed point around which others can regain their balance. One of the most powerful lessons I've learned about influence is this: true influence has nothing to do with title or position. Some of the most influential people I've ever met never held an official leadership role. They understood something crucial: influence flows from presence, not power. Let me share a truth that might surprise you. The moment you rely on authority to influence others, you've already begun to lose true influence. Because authentic influence isn't about making people do things, it's about inspiring them to want to do things. Think about the most influential person in your life. Was it their authority that moved you? Or was it something else? Their character, their wisdom, their way of being. This is what I mean by influence without authority. It's about developing the kind of presence that naturally draws others to your ideas and vision. I remember working with a young professional who was frustrated because she felt she couldn't influence her organization without a management title. She had great ideas, but she thought no one would listen because she wasn't in charge. We worked on shifting her perspective. Instead of focusing on what she lacked, authority, We focused on what she could develop, influence. She learned to build relationships across the organization. She became known for asking thoughtful questions rather than pushing solutions. She developed a reputation for helping others succeed. Within a year, she had become one of the most influential people in her company, not because she got promoted, but because she mastered the art of influence without authority. People sought her opinion not because they had to, but because they wanted to. This is the paradox of true influence. The less you rely on authority, the more influential you become. Because influence that doesn't depend on position or title is far more powerful and lasting than influence that does. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think influence without authority means being manipulative or political. Nothing could be further from the truth. Real influence without authority is built on authenticity, value creation, and genuine connection. Let me share with you the principles that make this possible. First, develop your expertise, but wear it lightly. Knowledge gives you credibility, but how you share that knowledge determines your influence. Be the person who helps others understand, not the person who makes others feel stupid. Second, build relationships before you need them. The time to develop connections is not when you want something, but when you can give something. Be genuinely interested in others' success. Look for ways to add value without expecting immediate return. Third, learn to read the informal networks in any group. Every organization has its unofficial influencers, the people others trust and listen to. Build authentic relationships with these natural leaders. Learn from their approach. Fourth, become known for your judgment, not just your knowledge. Anyone can share information, but people particularly value those who can help them make sense of information. Develop and demonstrate good judgment consistently. Fifth, master the art of informal influence. Learn to shape conversations not by dominating them, but by asking the right questions at the right time. Help groups discover solutions rather than imposing them. Remember this crucial point. In any group, there are two types of influence, formal and informal. Formal influence comes from position and can be given or taken away. Informal influence comes from trust and can only be earned. Think of influence like water in a stream. Formal authority is like trying to control the water with a dam. It works, but it creates resistance and pressure. Informal influence is like understanding the natural flow of the water and working with it, less forceful, but often more effective. Here's how you can develop this kind of natural influence. Be the person who helps others succeed. Nothing builds influence faster than being known as someone who genuinely wants others to do well. Look for opportunities to support others' goals. Share credit generously. Celebrate others' victories. Develop your emotional intelligence. Learn to read the room. Understand the unstated concerns and aspirations of others. Be the person who can articulate what others are feeling but haven't expressed. Build trust through consistency. Let your words and actions align. Be reliable. Follow through on commitments. These simple but powerful practices build the kind of credibility that creates lasting influence. Focus on contribution, not credit. When your primary concern is adding value rather than getting recognition, people naturally begin to seek your input and value your perspective. Master the art of suggestion rather than direction. Learn to plant seeds and let others water them. The ideas people discover for themselves are the ones they embrace most strongly. But perhaps most importantly, remember this: influence without authority isn't a technique, it's a way of being. It comes from who you are, not just what you do. It flows from your character, your competence, and your genuine concern for others. The beautiful thing about this kind of influence is that it's self-reinforcing. The more you help others succeed, the more they want to help you succeed. The more you focus on adding value, the more valuable you become to others. The more you build trust, the more people trust in you. In the end, influence without authority is the purest and most powerful form of influence there is. Because when people follow your lead not because they have to, but because they want to. That's when you've mastered true influence. Of all the principles I've taught over the years, this one might surprise you the most. True influence often flows not from displaying your strength, but from showing your humility. In a world where everyone is trying to prove how special they are, genuine humility has become a superpower. Let me be clear about something. The humility I'm talking about isn't about diminishing yourself or pretending to be less than you are. It's about having the quiet confidence to not need to prove yourself at every turn. It's about understanding that real strength lies in being secure enough to put others first. I've watched countless leaders, executives, and influencers make the same crucial mistake. They think they need to project an image of perfection, of unwavering certainty, of having all the answers. But here's what they don't realize. This approach doesn't build influence, it creates resistance. Let me share a story that illustrates this principle perfectly. Years ago, I worked with a brilliant executive who couldn't understand why his team wasn't embracing his vision. On paper, he was impressive. Multiple degrees, years of experience, and track record of success, and he made sure everyone knew it. But something interesting happened when we changed his approach. Instead of leading with his achievements, he started leading with his learning. Instead of hiding his mistakes, he began sharing them as lessons. Instead of always having the answer, he started asking for input. The transformation was remarkable. The same team that had been resistant became engaged. The same people who had been silent started contributing ideas. The same vision that had been stalled began moving forward. What changed? Not his competence, only his approach. This is the paradox of humble influence. The less you need to prove your value, the more valuable you become to others. The less you insist on your authority, the more willingly people accept your influence. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think humility means never standing up for your ideas or always deferring to others. Nothing could be further from the truth. Real humility is about having the confidence to not make everything about you. Let me share with you the principles of what I call influential humility. First, learn to say, "I don't know," with confidence. In a world of pretenders, authentic acknowledgement of what you don't know builds more credibility than pretending. To know everything. Follow it with, "but I'll find out." And you build trust while demonstrating initiative. Second, share your mistakes as teaching moments. When you're open about your failures and what you learned from them, you make it safe for others to learn and grow. You transform mistakes from sources of shame into sources of wisdom. Third, give credit generously and take responsibility readily. When things go well, shine the spotlight on others. When things go wrong, be the first to step forward. This pattern of behavior builds deep loyalty and trust. Fourth, listen more than you speak. True humility understands that you learn more from listening than from talking. Make it a practice to seek others' perspectives before sharing your own. Fifth, be willing to do what you ask of others. The most influential leaders I've known were never above rolling up their sleeves and getting their hands dirty. They led. By example, not by exemption. Remember this crucial point. Humility isn't about thinking less of yourself, it's about thinking of yourself less. It's about focusing your energy on understanding and elevating others rather than promoting yourself. Think of influence like light. Arrogance is like a spotlight. It can be impressive, but it only illuminates one thing at a time and often creates harsh shadows. Humility is like a lantern. It casts a gentler light that illuminates everything around it, making it easier for everyone to find their way. Here's how you can develop this kind of humble influence. Practice phrase changing. Instead of "I already knew that," try "That's a great point." Instead of "That won't work," try "Help me understand your thinking." Instead of "I did this," try "We accomplished this." Look for opportunities to elevate others. In meetings, draw out quiet voices. In projects, highlight others' contributions. In conversations, build on others' ideas. Make it your mission to help others shine. Develop genuine curiosity about others' perspectives. The moment you think you have nothing to learn from someone is the moment you start limiting your influence. Everyone has something to teach you if you're humble enough to learn. Be authentic about your challenges. When appropriate, share your struggles and uncertainties. This vulnerability, when coupled with competence, creates powerful connections and opens the door for real dialogue. Stay grounded in your values. True humility isn't about being a pushover. It's about being so secure in your principles that you don't need external validation to maintain your course. But perhaps most importantly, remember this: humility is not a technique. It's a fundamental orientation toward life and leadership. It's about understanding that your influence grows not by proving how great you are, but by bringing out the greatness in others. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it creates a virtuous cycle. The more you practice genuine humility, the more people trust you. The more people trust you, the more influence you naturally acquire. The more influence you have, the more opportunities you have to elevate others. In the end, humble influence is the most sustainable form of influence there is, because when you lead with humility, you create the kind of influence that doesn't depend on position or power. It flows from who you are, not what you can demand from others. There's a simple truth about human nature that I've observed over decades of teaching. Nothing is as sweet to a person's ears as the sound of their own name. It's not just about memory. It's about making people feel significant, recognized, and valued. The ability to remember and use names effectively is one of the most powerful tools of influence you'll ever possess. Let me share something profound with you. When you remember someone's name, you're doing more than recalling a word. You're acknowledging their humanity. You're saying, "You matter enough for me to make the effort to remember who you are." I've watched countless relationships transform through this simple practice. I remember working with a sales executive who was struggling to build connections with his clients. He had all the product knowledge, all the technical expertise, but something was missing. When we analyzed his approach, we discovered he rarely used people's names, thinking it might seem too familiar or pushy. We worked on changing this habit. He began consciously using people's names in conversation, not mechanically, but naturally and respectfully. The transformation in his relationships was immediate and profound. The same clients who had been formal and distant became engaged and responsive. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think remembering names is about memory tricks and techniques. While those can be helpful, true mastery of names comes from genuine interest in people. When you truly care about someone, remembering their name becomes natural, not mechanical. Let me share with you the principles of what I call name mastery. First, understand the psychology behind names. Your name is tied to your identity, your self-worth, your sense of being. When someone remembers and uses your name, it triggers positive emotional responses at a deep level. Second, make the conscious decision to remember names. Most people who say, "I'm terrible with names," have simply never made remembering names a priority. Change starts with the decision to value this skill. Third, develop a system that works for you. When you meet someone new, repeat their name immediately in conversation. Create associations. Look for distinctive features. Write it down if you can. The specific technique matters less than having a consistent approach. Fourth, use names naturally in conversation. Don't overdo it. That feels manipulative. Instead, use names at natural points. Greetings, goodbyes, when asking for opinions, when expressing appreciation. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, recover gracefully when you forget, because you will forget sometimes, and that's okay. The honest admission, "I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name," actually builds trust when handled with genuine regret and warmth. But remembering names is just the beginning. Let's talk about the broader skill of face recognition and personal details. This is where influence becomes truly powerful. Think about how you feel when someone not only remembers your name, but also recalls details about your life, your children's names, your interests, your recent experiences. It creates an immediate connection, doesn't it? Here's how you can develop this deeper level of personal recognition. Make it a practice to note distinctive features about people, not just physical characteristics, but their energy, their way of speaking, their unique expressions. This helps cement both their face and their personality in your memory. Keep a record of important personal details. In this digital age, there's no shame in using technology to help you remember. Make notes after meaningful conversations. Review them before future meetings. Listen actively when people share personal information. Don't just wait for your turn to speak. Really hear what they're saying about their lives, their interests, their challenges. This natural interest will help you remember details better than any memory technique. Create connection points between what you learn about different people. Maybe two of your colleagues have children the same age, or share a hobby, or face similar challenges. These connections help you remember details and create opportunities for meaningful introductions. Use what you remember to show you care. Follow up on previous conversations. Ask about important events they mentioned. Share resources related to their interests. This transforms mere memory into meaningful connection. But remember this crucial point. The goal isn't to impress people with your memory. It's to make them feel valued and understood. Use what you remember to serve others, not to show off. Think of it this way. Every person you meet is carrying their own story, their own hopes, their own challenges. When you remember their name and their story, you're saying, "Your story matters to me." This kind of personal recognition creates what I call relationship compound interest. Each time you remember and acknowledge something personal about someone, you make a small deposit in the relationship. Over time, these deposits grow into deep connections and lasting influence. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it becomes easier with practice. The more you focus on remembering names and faces, the better you get at it. The more details you remember about people, the more natural it becomes to recall new information. But perhaps most importantly, this skill transforms how you see others. Instead of moving through a world of strangers, you begin to see a web of individual stories, each worthy of attention and recognition. This shift in perspective makes you not just more influential, but more human. Remember, in a world where people increasingly feel like numbers, the simple act of remembering and using someone's name becomes a powerful act of recognition. It's not just about memory. It's about showing others that, in your eyes, they matter. There is a dimension of influence that's rarely discussed, but absolutely crucial to master: timing. You can have the right message, the right approach, and the right intentions, but if your timing is wrong, your influence will fail. As I've observed over years of teaching human relations, timing isn't just about when you speak, it's about understanding the rhythm of human interaction. Let me share a truth that might transform how you think about influence. The right message at the wrong time becomes the wrong message. I've watched brilliant ideas fail and simple suggestions succeed based solely on when they were presented. Think about it. How many times have you had the perfect solution but presented it at a moment when no one was ready to hear it? How often have you tried to influence someone when they were too stressed, too distracted, or too emotional to be influenced? I remember working with a talented manager who couldn't understand why her innovative ideas kept getting rejected. Her proposals were excellent, her presentation skills were strong, but something wasn't working. When we analyzed the situation, the problem became clear. She was presenting transformative ideas at times when her team was overwhelmed with immediate challenges. We worked on developing what I call timing intelligence. She learned to read the emotional and operational rhythm of her organization. She began presenting her bigger ideas during periods of relative calm and stability. The same ideas that had been rejected were suddenly being embraced and implemented. This is what I mean by mastering the art of timing. It's about understanding. That influence isn't just about what you say or how you say it. It's about when you say it. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think timing is about waiting for the perfect moment. There is no perfect moment. Mastering timing is about understanding and working with the natural rhythms of human interaction and organizational life. Let me share with you the principles of what I call influential timing. First, learn to read the emotional weather. Just as you wouldn't plan an outdoor event without checking the weather forecast, don't attempt to influence without assessing the emotional climate. Are people feeling secure or threatened, energized or exhausted, optimistic or worried? Second, understand the cycles of receptivity. Every person, every team, every organization has natural rhythms of openness and closure. Learn to recognize when people are most open to new ideas and when they need space to process and integrate. Third, master the pause. Sometimes the most influential thing you can do is wait. A well-timed pause can be more powerful than the most eloquent argument. Learn to be comfortable with strategic silence. Fourth, develop your sense of urgency intelligence. Know when to move quickly and when to let things develop naturally. Some opportunities must be seized immediately, while others require patient cultivation. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, learn to create timing. Sometimes you need to actively shape the conditions that make your influence more effective, rather than waiting for them to appear naturally. Here's how you can develop this sophisticated sense of timing. Start by observing patterns. Notice when decisions tend to be made in your organization. Pay attention to when people are most receptive to new ideas. Look for the rhythms of energy and attention in your team or community. Learn to recognize readiness signals. People in organizations give off subtle cues when they're ready for change or new ideas. These might include increased questions about current methods, expressions of frustration with the status quo, or casual mentions of the need for something different. Develop your ability to create receptive moments. Sometimes you need to prepare the ground before planting your seeds of influence. This might mean having preliminary conversations, sharing relevant information gradually, or helping others recognize challenges that your idea will address. Master the art of the trial balloon. Before presenting a major idea, learn to float smaller versions or related concepts to test receptivity. This gives you valuable feedback about timing without risking your main objective. Understand the power of sequential influence. Sometimes the best timing strategy is to break your influence goal into smaller steps, each time to build on the success of the previous one. But remember this crucial point. Timing isn't just about choosing when to act, it's also about knowing when to step back. Sometimes the most influential thing you can do is recognize that now is not the time and gracefully withdraw until conditions improve. Think of timing like surfing. A great surfer doesn't try to force the waves to come. They study them, understand their patterns, and position themselves to catch them at just the right moment. Similarly, skilled influencers learn to read and work with the natural rhythms of human interaction. Here's how this plays out in practice. If you sense resistance, don't push harder. Step back and ask yourself if the timing is wrong. Often, what seems like opposition to your idea is really just opposition to its timing. Learn to recognize and respect others' timing needs. Some people need time to process new ideas. Some organizations need to move through certain cycles before they're ready for change. Work with these natural rhythms rather than against them. Develop your ability to create timing bridges, ways to maintain connection and influence during periods when direct action isn't appropriate. This might mean keeping communication channels open, sharing relevant information, or simply maintaining relationships. Pay attention to external timing factors. World events, market conditions, organizational changes, all these can affect the timing of your influence efforts. Learn to read these broader patterns and adjust your timing accordingly. But perhaps most importantly, remember this. Timing is about respect. Respect for the natural rhythms of human interaction. Respect for others' readiness or lack thereof. Respect for the organic development of influence and change. The beautiful thing about mastering timing is that it makes your influence both more effective and more graceful. Instead of forcing your way forward, you learn to move with the natural flow of human interaction. Instead of creating resistance, you create resonance. There's a fundamental truth about influence that I've observed over and over again. People are most influenced by those they feel are like them. This isn't about superficial similarities. It's about finding genuine common ground, shared values, and mutual understanding. I call this finding the common thread, and it's one of the most powerful principles of influence you can master. Let me share something profound with you. In every interaction, there exists a potential connection point, a common thread that can bind two people together in understanding and trust. Your ability to find and strengthen these threads determines your capacity to influence. I remember working with a young executive who was struggling to connect with her team. On paper, they seemed to have little in common. She was from a different generation, had different educational background, different life experiences. But when we dug deeper, we discovered something fascinating. Despite all their surface differences, they shared core values about family, hard work, and personal growth. When she started emphasizing these common values in her communication and leadership style, something remarkable happened. The same team that had seemed distant and unreachable began to open up and engage. This is what I mean by finding the common thread. It's about looking past surface differences to find the deeper connections that unite us as human beings. But here's where most people get it wrong. They try to manufacture commonality or focus only on superficial similarities. Real connection comes from finding authentic common ground, even in the midst of obvious differences. Let me share with you the principles of what I call connection influence. First, understand that commonality creates comfort. When people sense that you share their values, experiences, or perspectives, their natural defenses begin to lower. This creates an opening for genuine influence. Second, learn to look for universal human experiences. No matter how different people might seem, certain experiences unite us all: the desire for respect, the need for understanding, the hope for a better future. Third, master the art of finding common ground without compromising authenticity. Don't pretend to be something you're not. Instead, focus on genuine points of connection, no matter how small they might initially seem. Fourth, develop your ability to highlight shared values without diminishing differences. Diversity of perspective is valuable, but it's the common values underneath that create lasting connections. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, learn to create common ground where none seems to exist. Sometimes you need to build bridges of understanding rather than simply finding them. Here's how you can develop this skill of finding and strengthening common threads. Start with curiosity rather than assumption. Instead of looking for obvious similarities, approach each person with genuine interest in their story, their values, their perspectives. You'll often find unexpected connection points. Listen for values beneath positions. People might disagree on methods while sharing underlying values about what's important. These shared values are your strongest connection points. Share your own experiences judiciously. When you find a genuine point of connection, sharing a relevant personal experience can strengthen the bond. But be selective. Share to connect, not to impress. Look for shared challenges. Often, people who seem very different face similar obstacles or struggles. These common challenges can become powerful points of connection and mutual understanding. Create shared experiences. Sometimes the best way to find common ground is to create it through shared activities, projects, or goals. Working together toward a common objective creates natural connection points. But remember this crucial point: finding common threads isn't about ignoring differences or pretending they don't exist. It's about building bridges of understanding that can span those differences. Think of it this way. Every person you meet is like a unique tapestry, woven from countless threads of experience, belief, and aspiration. Your job is to find the threads that connect your tapestry to theirs, creating a stronger fabric of understanding and influence. Here's how this plays out in practice. When you meet someone new, look for connection points beyond the obvious. Don't just focus on surface similarities. Dig deeper for shared values, common experiences, or mutual interests. Practice what I might call value listening, paying attention not just to what people say, but to the values and beliefs that underlie their words. These often reveal unexpected common ground. Use shared experiences as building blocks for connection. When you discover a common experience, whether it's facing a similar challenge, working in the same industry, or sharing a passion, explore it fully but authentically. Develop your ability to find common ground even in disagreement. Often, people who disagree on solutions share common concerns about the underlying problem. This shared concern can become your connection point. Create opportunities for discovering commonality. Ask questions that reveal shared values. Share stories that invite others to recognize common experiences. Look for ways to highlight mutual understanding. But perhaps most importantly, remember this: finding common threads isn't a technique, it's an orientation toward others. It's about approaching each person with the belief that, despite all our differences, there are always points of genuine connection to be found. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it creates what I call connection compound interest. Each common thread you discover makes it easier to find others. Each authentic connection you make opens the door to deeper understanding. Each bridge of commonality you build strengthens your overall influence. In the end, finding and strengthening common threads is about more than influence. It's about creating genuine human connection. Because when people feel truly connected to you, influence flows naturally from that connection. Here's a truth about influence that might challenge everything you think you know. The most powerful ideas are not the ones you give to others. They're the ones others believe they discovered for themselves. I've spent decades teaching this principle, and it never ceases to amaze me how transformative it can be. Let me share something profound. People rarely resist their own ideas. Think about that for a moment. When was the last time you eagerly fought against your own conclusion? When did you last actively resist a solution you felt you had discovered? I remember working with a brilliant business leader who couldn't understand why his team wasn't implementing his clearly superior solutions. His ideas were excellent, his logic was sound, but something wasn't working. When we analyzed the situation, we discovered his fundamental mistake. He was giving his team fish instead of teaching them how to fish. We shifted his approach completely. Instead of presenting fully formed solutions, he began asking guided questions. Instead of telling his team what to do, he started creating conditions where they could discover solutions themselves. The transformation was remarkable. The same ideas that had been rejected when they came from him were now being enthusiastically implemented because the team felt ownership of them. This is what I mean by letting others own the idea. It's about understanding that influence isn't about pushing your thoughts onto others. It's about helping others discover thoughts they can claim as their own. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think this principle means manipulating people into thinking they came up with your idea. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's about creating genuine conditions for discovery and learning. Let me share with you the principles of what I call discovery influence. First, understand that ownership creates commitment. When people feel they've discovered something themselves, they become naturally committed to its success. They're not just implementing an idea, they're nurturing their own creation. Second, master the art of guided discovery. Learn to ask questions that lead people toward insights rather than telling them what to think. The journey of discovery is as important as the destination. Third, develop patience with the process. Sometimes letting others discover solutions takes longer than simply telling them what to do. But the extra time investment pays enormous dividends in commitment and implementation. Fourth, learn to plant seeds rather than full-grown plants. Share information, examples, and possibilities that others can nurture into their own insights and solutions. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, be willing to let go of credit. The moment you try to claim ownership of an idea, you diminish others' sense of ownership and consequently their commitment to it. Here's how you can develop this sophisticated approach to influence. Start with questions rather than answers. When you see a solution, resist the urge to share it immediately. Instead, ask questions that might lead others to discover similar insights. What patterns do you notice here? What possibilities do you see? What might happen if we looked at this differently? Create conditions for discovery. Share relevant information, examples, and experiences that might spark insights, but present them as resources for exploration rather than directions for action. Practice what I call influence through inquiry. Instead of making statements, ask thoughtful questions. Instead of giving solutions, explore possibilities together. Instead of directing, discover together. Master the art of the subtle suggestion. Learn to offer ideas in ways that allow others to build on them and make them their own. I wonder if something like, what if we explored? Has anyone considered develop your ability to nurture others' ideas? When someone shares a thought that aligns with your goal, give it your full attention and support. Help them develop and refine it. Let them feel the full pride of ownership. But remember this crucial point. This isn't about manipulation or deceit. It's about understanding that genuine influence often works best when it's indirect, when it creates conditions for others to reach their own conclusions and make their own discoveries. Think of it like gardening. You can't force a plant to grow by pulling on it, but you can create perfect conditions for growth: rich soil, adequate water, proper sunlight. Similarly, you can't force someone to embrace an idea, but you can create conditions where ideas naturally take root and flourish. Here's how this plays out in practice. When you see a solution to a problem, resist the urge to announce it. Instead, guide others through the discovery process. What do you see as the key challenges here? What approaches have worked in similar situations? Learn to recognize and celebrate others' discoveries, even when they mirror solutions you had in mind. Their ownership of the idea is more valuable than your recognition for it. Practice what I call idea midwifery, helping others give birth to their own insights and solutions. This requires patience, skill, and a willingness to put others' growth ahead of your own recognition. Develop your ability to merge and build on others' ideas. When someone shares a thought that's close to your solution, help them develop it further rather than replacing it with your own. Create environments that encourage discovery and ownership. Foster open discussion. Welcome different perspectives and celebrate independent thinking. But perhaps most importantly, remember this: when you let others own ideas, you're not giving up influence, you're multiplying it. Because an idea embraced becomes more powerful than an idea imposed. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it creates what I call influence sustainability. When people own ideas, they don't just implement them, they champion them. They don't just accept them, they advance them. They become not just participants in change, but drivers of it. In the end, letting others own ideas is about more than influence, it's about developing people. Because when you help others discover solutions rather than just giving them answers, you're not just solving immediate problems. You're building future problem solvers. In all my years of teaching the principles of influence, I've noticed something fascinating. Most people underestimate the power of silence. They fill every space with words, rush to break every pause, and miss countless opportunities to deepen their influence. Today, I want to share with you one of the most powerful yet least understood tools of influence: strategic silence. Let me share a truth that might surprise you. Sometimes, the most influential thing you can say is nothing at all. In a world where everyone is competing to be heard, the person who knows when to be quiet wields extraordinary power. I remember working with a negotiation expert who was struggling to close important deals. She was brilliant, articulate, and knowledgeable, but she had a habit of filling every moment of silence with more information, more persuasion, more words. When we analyzed her approach, we discovered that she was actually talking herself out of success. We worked on developing what I call silence comfort, the ability to stay quiet and let silence do the work. The transformation in her results was immediate and dramatic. The same negotiations that had been stalling began to flow smoothly. The same resistance she had been facing began to dissolve. This is what I mean by the subtle strength of silence. It's about understanding that influence often flows not from what you say, but from what you don't say, and when you don't say it. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think silence is passive, that it means doing nothing. In reality, strategic silence is one of the most active and powerful tools of influence you can master. Let me share with you the principles of what I call silence influence. First, understand that silence creates space for others to think, feel, and process. When you stop filling every moment with words, you give others the gift of reflection. And reflection often leads to deeper commitment than persuasion. Second, learn to use silence as a way of drawing others out. When you become comfortable with silence, others often feel compelled to fill it, and what they say in those moments is usually far more valuable than what you might have said. Third, master the art of the strategic pause. Learn to pause before responding, pause after making important points, pause when emotions run high. These moments of silence can be more powerful than any words. Fourth, develop your ability to listen not just to words, but to silence itself. Different kinds of silence carry different meanings: comfort, discomfort, reflection, resistance. Learn to read these subtle signals. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, understand that silence can communicate more powerfully than words. Confidence, wisdom, and strength often show themselves most clearly in moments of calculated silence. Here's how you can develop this sophisticated use of silence. Start by practicing what I call the power pause. When someone asks you an important question, resist the urge to answer immediately. Take a moment to reflect. This small pause demonstrates thoughtfulness and adds weight to your response. Learn to be comfortable with silence in conversations. Don't rush to fill every quiet moment. Let silence do its work of creating space for deeper thought and genuine connection. Master the art of the reflective silence. When someone shares something important, don't immediately respond with your own experience or advice. Let their words hang in the air for a moment. This shows respect for what they've shared and often encourages them to share more deeply. Develop your ability to use silence as a way of emphasizing important points. When you make a significant statement, let it resonate in silence rather than immediately following it with more words. Practice what I call silence leadership, showing others through your example that it's okay to take time to think, to reflect, to simply be quiet together. But remember this crucial point: strategic silence isn't about being aloof or unresponsive. It's about understanding when silence serves better than words. Think of influence like music. Just as the spaces between notes are as important as the notes themselves, the silences in your communication are as important as your words. Without these spaces, you don't have music, you have noise. Here's how this plays out in practice. In negotiations, learn to make your point and then be quiet. Let others sit with your position rather than continuing to argue for it. Often, silence creates more pressure for a response than additional words ever could. When receiving feedback or criticism, resist the urge to defend immediately. Let silence show that you're truly listening and considering what's being said. In moments of conflict or high emotion, use silence as a tool for de-escalation. Sometimes the most powerful response to anger or frustration is calm silence. When others are working through important decisions, give them the gift of silence. Don't pressure them with words. Let them process in their own time and way. Create what I call silence opportunities, moments in conversations where you deliberately step back and create space for others to step forward. But perhaps most importantly, remember this: silence is not the absence of influence. It's often influence in its most powerful form. The beautiful thing about mastering silence is that it transforms not just how you influence others, but how you experience interaction itself. You become more observant, more thoughtful, more impactful in your communications. When you embrace the power of silence, you discover that influence doesn't always require more words. Sometimes it requires fewer. You learn that the spaces between your words can be as meaningful as the words themselves. In a world that's increasingly noisy, your ability to use silence effectively becomes increasingly valuable. It sets you apart. It makes your words count. More, it deepens your influence in ways that constant talking never could. Let me share with you one of the most powerful truths I've learned about influence. Your response to criticism often matters more than your response to praise. In fact, how you handle criticism can either multiply or destroy your influence in an instant. Think about it. Anyone can be influential when things are going well, but the true measure of your influence and your character shows itself in how you handle criticism, opposition, and challenging feedback. I remember working with a talented executive who was puzzled by her diminishing influence in her organization. Her work was excellent, her ideas were sound, but something was eroding her effectiveness. When we analyzed the situation, we discovered the issue. Her defensive reactions to criticism were gradually undermining trust in her leadership. This is a pattern I've seen countless times. People work hard to build influence through their competence, their character, their connections, and then watch it all erode because they haven't mastered the art of handling criticism with grace. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think handling criticism well means either fighting back skillfully or maintaining a stoic facade. Neither approach builds influence. True grace under criticism is about something much more powerful. Let me share with you the principles of what I call criticism mastery. First, understand that criticism handled well can actually increase your influence. When you respond to criticism with grace and wisdom, you demonstrate a kind of strength that builds deep trust and respect. Second, recognize that most criticism contains at least a grain of truth. Your ability to find and acknowledge that truth, even in unfair criticism, marks you as someone who values growth over ego. Third, learn to separate the message from the messenger. Sometimes valuable feedback comes wrapped in harsh delivery. Don't let the packaging prevent you from receiving the gift. Fourth, master the art of the pause. The space between receiving criticism and responding to it is where wisdom lives. Make that space larger. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, understand that your response to criticism shows others how secure you are in your own worth. This security is a cornerstone of lasting influence. Here's how you can develop this sophisticated approach to handling criticism. Start by practicing what I call the gratitude shift. When criticized, train yourself to first think, what can I learn from this, rather than how can I defend against this? This small mental shift can transform how you experience criticism. Learn to listen to criticism with your whole being. Don't just hear the words. Try to understand the concern, frustration, or hope that might lie beneath them. Often, criticism is poorly expressed caring. Master the art of the constructive pause. When criticized, take a breath. Let the initial emotional reaction pass. Respond from wisdom rather than wounds. Develop your ability to find the useful truth in any criticism. Even if the criticism is 90% unfair, look for the 10% that might help you grow. This approach disarms critics and demonstrates true confidence. Practice what I call criticism aikido, the art of absorbing the energy of criticism and redirecting it toward positive change. Instead of resisting criticism or collapsing under it, use its energy constructively. But remember this crucial point. Handling criticism with grace doesn't mean accepting all criticism as valid. It means responding to all criticism with wisdom and dignity. Think of criticism like a mirror. It might not always show you what you want to see, but it always shows you something worth considering. Your task is to look into that mirror with courage and curiosity, rather than fear or defensiveness. Here's how this plays out in practice. When receiving criticism, start with acknowledgement. I appreciate you sharing this with me, or thank you for bringing this to my attention. Create space for a constructive dialogue. Learn to ask clarifying questions rather than jumping to defense. Could you help me understand more about your concern? Shows both confidence and a genuine desire to learn. Practice what I call feedback partnership. Engage critics in solving problems rather than just receiving their complaints. How do you think we could improve this? Turns critics into collaborators. Develop your ability to separate useful criticism from toxic criticism. Respond to both with grace, but act only on the useful ones. This discernment is crucial for maintaining both growth and boundaries. Create what I call criticism confidence, the ability to remain centered and constructive even in the face of harsh or unfair criticism. This comes from knowing your worth isn't determined by others' opinions, but perhaps most importantly, remember this. Your response to criticism often teaches others how to handle criticism themselves. When you model grace under fire, you influence not just the current situation, but future interactions as well. The beautiful thing about mastering this approach is that it transforms criticism from a threat to an opportunity. Instead of dreading criticism, you begin to see it as a chance to demonstrate character, build trust, and deepen influence. When you handle criticism with genuine grace, something remarkable happens. People begin to trust you more deeply. They become more willing to share honest feedback. They respect your stability and maturity. Your influence grows not despite criticism, but partly because of how you handle it. In the end, your ability to handle criticism well becomes a form of leadership in itself. It shows others that strength isn't about never being criticized. It's about responding to criticism in ways that build rather than destroy, that unite rather than divide, that elevate rather than diminish. Let me share with you one of the most transformative principles of influence I've discovered in my years of teaching. The moment you shift from being critical to being curious, your influence expands exponentially. This simple but profound shift can transform how you interact with others and dramatically increase your ability to create positive change. Think about the last time someone criticized your ideas or decisions. How did it make you feel? Now think about the last time someone showed genuine curiosity about your thinking. Notice the difference in how these approaches affected you. I remember working with a senior leader who was frustrated by his team's resistance to change. He was smart, experienced, and usually right about what needed to be done. But his habit of pointing out flaws in others' thinking was creating a wall between him and his team. We worked on shifting his approach from critique to curiosity. Instead of saying, "That won't work," because he learned to ask, "Help me understand how you see this working." The transformation in his team's response was immediate and profound. The same people who had been defensive and resistant became open and engaged. This is what I mean by staying curious rather than critical. It's about approaching differences with genuine interest rather than judgment, with questions rather than corrections. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think being curious means never disagreeing or challenging others' ideas. Nothing could be further from the truth. Real curiosity often leads to deeper and more productive challenges than direct criticism ever could. Let me share with you the principles of what I call curiosity influence. First, understand that curiosity disarms defensiveness. When people sense you're genuinely interested in understanding their perspective, their natural defensive barriers begin to lower. Second, recognize that curiosity creates connection. Asking questions with genuine interest builds bridges of understanding that criticism tends to destroy. Third, learn to use curiosity as a tool for deeper influence. The questions you ask can guide people to discover new perspectives without feeling pushed or judged. Fourth, master the art of curious listening. Don't just ask questions. Listen to the answers with genuine interest and openness to learning. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, develop what I call curiosity confidence, the security to be genuinely interested in perspectives different from your own. Here's how you can develop this sophisticated approach to influence. Start by practicing what I call the curiosity pause. When you feel the urge to criticize or correct, pause and ask yourself, what could I learn here? What don't I understand about their perspective? Learn to ask questions that open thinking rather than close it. Instead of, why did you do that? Try, what led you to choose this approach? Notice how different these questions feel. Master the art of building on others' ideas through curious inquiry. That's interesting. How might we develop that further? Opens up possibilities that criticism would shut down. Develop your ability to be curious even when you disagree. Some of the most powerful learning opportunities come from genuinely trying to understand perspectives very different from your own. Practice what I call appreciative curiosity, looking for what's valuable in others' ideas before exploring what might need improvement. But remember this crucial point: curiosity must be genuine. People can sense when your questions are really disguised criticism, and this destroys trust rather than builds it. Think of curiosity like a spotlight. When you shine it on others' ideas and perspectives, you help everyone see them more clearly, including aspects you might have missed in your initial judgment. Here's how this plays out in practice. When someone presents an idea you think won't work, resist the urge to point out the flaws. Instead, ask questions that help both of you explore the idea more deeply. How do you see this handling potential challenge? Learn to use phrases that invite deeper sharing. Tell me more about that. What makes you see it that way? Help me understand your thinking here. Practice what I call curiosity chaining, letting each answer lead to another genuine question following the thread of understanding rather than leading to a predetermined conclusion. Develop your ability to be curious about both content and context. Don't just explore what people think. Try to understand why they think it, what experiences have shaped their perspective. Create what I call curiosity spaces in your interactions. Moments where you deliberately step back from judgment to explore and understand more deeply. But perhaps most importantly, remember this: curiosity isn't just a tool for gathering information. It's a way of being that creates openness, trust, and genuine connection. The beautiful thing about leading with curiosity is that it transforms not just your interactions, but your own understanding. When you approach differences with genuine curiosity, you often discover value you might have missed through a critical lens. When you stay curious rather than critical, something remarkable happens. People become more willing to share their real thoughts with you. They become more open to considering different perspectives. They feel heard and valued rather than judged and dismissed. In the end, curiosity becomes a form of respect, a way of honoring others' experiences and perspectives, even when they differ from your own. And this respect, more than any technique or tactic, is what creates lasting influence. Remember, everyone you meet knows something you don't. Every perspective contains some truth you might need. When you approach life with genuine curiosity rather than criticism, you not only increase your influence, you expand your understanding of what's possible. Let me share with you the most fundamental truth about influence I've discovered In all my years of teaching, your actions speak so loudly that people can't hear what you're saying. In fact, the moment your words and actions misalign, you begin to lose influence, not gradually, but instantly. Think about someone who has deeply influenced your life. I'm willing to bet that what impressed you most wasn't what they said. It was how consistently they lived what they taught. This alignment between words and actions is what I call walking the talk, and it's the foundation of lasting influence. I remember working with a company president who couldn't understand why his organizational values weren't taking hold. The values were beautifully written, prominently displayed, frequently discussed, but something wasn't working. When we analyzed the situation, the problem became crystal clear. While he preached work-life balance, he sent emails at midnight. While he talked about open communication, he was often unavailable. While he emphasized teamwork, he made unilateral decisions. This gap between words and actions wasn't just failing to build influence, it was actively destroying it. Every misalignment was eroding trust. Every inconsistency was breeding cynicism. This is what I mean by walk the talk or say nothing at all. It's about understanding that inconsistency is worse than silence. When you say one thing and do another, you don't just fail to influence, you create resistance. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think walking the talk means being perfect. It doesn't. It means being authentically committed to living your values even when it's difficult, even when you sometimes fall short. Let me share with you the principles of what I call action influence. First, understand that consistency builds trust. When your actions reliably match your words, people learn to count on you. This predictability becomes a foundation for influence. Second, recognize that small inconsistencies can have large impacts. People notice the little things, the slight departures from stated values, the minor contradictions between words and actions. Third, learn to audit your own behavior regularly. Ask yourself, am I living what I'm teaching? Are my actions aligned with my message? Fourth, master the art of acknowledging when your actions fall short. Nothing builds credibility like honest admission of inconsistency coupled with renewed commitment to alignment. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, develop what I call behavioral integrity, the habit of making commitments only to values you're truly prepared to live. Here's how you can develop this powerful alignment between words and actions. Start with what I call the consistency check. Before you advocate for any principle or value, ask yourself, am I ready to live this? Am I willing to be held accountable to this standard? Learn to recognize your own inconsistencies quickly. The sooner you notice misalignment between your words and actions, the sooner you can correct it. Master the art of behavioral congruence. Make sure your nonverbal communication, your tone, your body language, your energy aligns with your verbal message. Develop your ability to lead by example without drawing attention to it. True walking of the talk doesn't need to be advertised. It's evident in your daily actions. Practice what I call value vigilance, constantly monitoring the alignment between what you say matters and what your actions show matters. But remember this crucial point. Walking the talk isn't about maintaining a perfect image. It's about maintaining authentic commitment to your principles, even when it's challenging. Think of influence like a bank account of trust. Every time your actions align with your words, you make a deposit. Every inconsistency makes a withdrawal. And like a bank account, it's easier to lose trust than to build it. Here's how this plays out in practice. When you make a commitment, follow through, even in small things. People notice if you're on time to meetings, if you meet deadlines, if you do what you said you would do. Learn to say no to things that would force you to compromise your principles. Better to decline than to commit and fail to deliver. Practice what I call visible values, finding small daily ways to demonstrate through action what matters to you. Develop your ability to maintain alignment even under pressure. It's easy to walk the talk when things are going well, the real. Test comes during challenges. Create what I call accountability partnerships, relationships where others are encouraged to point out any inconsistencies they notice in your words and actions. But perhaps most importantly, remember this: your actions create ripples far beyond your awareness. People are watching, learning, and deciding whether to trust your influence based on the consistency they observe. The beautiful thing about truly walking your talk is that it simplifies influence. You don't have to remember what you said. You just have to live what you believe. You don't have to convince others of your values. They can see them in action. When you consistently walk your talk, something remarkable happens. Your influence grows without effort. People begin to trust not just your words, but your character. They follow your lead not because of what you say, but because of who you are. In the end, walking your talk becomes more than a practice. It becomes your identity, and this alignment between who you are, what you say, and what you do creates the kind of influence that no technique or tactic could ever match. Remember, in the arena of influence, actions aren't just louder than words. They're more memorable, more impactful, and more transformative. Choose them wisely. As we conclude our journey through the principles of perfect influence, let me share with you what I consider the crowning achievement of true influence: the ability to build bridges that last. Not temporary connections for immediate gain, but lasting bonds that create value for everyone they touch. You see, most people approach influence as a series of transactions, individual moments of impact designed to achieve specific goals. But the masters of influence understand something deeper. True influence isn't about winning moments. It's about building monuments of lasting positive impact. I remember working with a business leader who had achieved everything society typically measures: wealth, position, power. But something was troubling him. "All my successes feel hollow," he told me. "I've won every battle, but somehow I feel like I'm losing the war." When we analyzed his approach to influence, we discovered why. He had mastered tactical influence, the ability to get immediate results, but had never developed strategic influence, the ability to build lasting positive impact. He had created compliance but not commitment, obedience but not ownership, results but not relationships. This is what I mean by building bridges that last. It's about understanding that the greatest influence isn't measured by what happens in the moment of interaction, but by what continues to happen long after you're gone. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think building lasting influence means creating dependency or ensuring they're always needed. Nothing could be further from the truth. The strongest bridges stand on their own, supporting traffic in both directions, long after their builder has moved on. Let me share with you the principles of what I call legacy influence. First, understand that lasting influence grows from genuine value creation. When you consistently make others' lives better, your influence naturally endures. Second, recognize that the strongest bridges are built on trust, reinforced by integrity, and maintained by consistent care for others' well-being. Third, learn to think generationally about influence. Ask yourself not just, what can I achieve today, but what can I set in motion for tomorrow? Fourth, master the art of building self-sustaining, positive impact. The greatest influence often comes from helping others develop their own ability to influence positively. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, develop what I call bridge builders. Vision, the ability to see connections and possibilities that create lasting value for all involved. Here's how you can develop this sophisticated approach to lasting influence. Start with what I call the legacy question. Before any significant interaction, ask yourself, how can this create lasting positive value for everyone involved? Learn to build influence that's independent of your presence. The true test of your influence isn't what happens when you're there, but what continues to happen when you're not. Master the art of creating self-reinforcing positive cycles. Look for ways your influence can create conditions that naturally generate more positive outcomes over time. Develop your ability to build capacity in others. The most lasting influence often comes from helping others grow into their own positive influence. Practice what I call bridge maintenance, regularly investing in the relationships and connections you've built, ensuring they remain strong and valuable for all involved. But remember this crucial point. Building lasting bridges isn't about creating monuments to yourself. It's about creating lasting pathways for mutual benefit and growth. Think of influence like planting a garden. Tactical influence is like growing annual flowers, beautiful but temporary. Strategic influence is like planting trees. It takes longer to show results, but creates value that grows over time. Here's how this plays out in practice. When making decisions, consider not just immediate outcomes, but long-term implications. Ask yourself, how will this choice affect relationships and opportunities in the future? Learn to create what I call influence ecosystems, networks of positive relationships and interactions that support and strengthen each other naturally. Practice what I call bridge-building generosity, looking for opportunities to connect others who can benefit from knowing each other, creating value beyond your direct influence. Develop your ability to see and create win-win-win scenarios where your influence creates lasting positive impact for multiple parties simultaneously. Create what I call legacy moments, opportunities to teach, mentor, or support others in ways that will continue to create value long after the interaction. But perhaps most importantly, remember this: the greatest bridges aren't built for personal glory. They're built to serve others. Your lasting influence will be measured not by what you gained, but by what you helped others achieve. The beautiful thing about building lasting bridges is that it transforms not just your influence, but your entire approach to life and leadership. You begin to think bigger, act more generously, and create more value naturally. When you focus on building bridges that last, something remarkable happens. Your influence becomes self-perpetuating. The positive impact you create begins to multiply through others. Your legacy grows not through your continued effort, but through the ongoing value of the connections you've built. In the end, this is the true measure of perfect influence, not what you can achieve in a moment, but what continues to create value over time. Not how many people follow you today, but how many lives are better tomorrow because of the bridges you built. Remember, the most powerful influence isn't about the immediate impact you can make. It's about the lasting positive change you can set in motion. Build bridges that serve others, that stand the test of time, that create value long after you've moved on. That's the ultimate achievement in the art of influence.